So we're doing Parshas Yitro, which is on page 394 and 395, if you want to follow. And this is probably one of the more significant, on a personal level for people, one of the more significant Parshas. Not that one Parsha is any more important than any other, really, but here they have the story of the giving of the Torah, right? One of the most really unique and extraordinary experiences in the history of the world. A time when man and God actually touch, they come together, right? It's an extraordinary occasion. But we're going to talk about a number of the things in the Parsha, not just that part. And also the interesting fact that this Parsha's Yitro, it's named for this non-Jewish priest, right? The name of the Parsha is called Yitro, Jethro. And he was Moshe's father-in-law, and he was known, we see it a number of places in the Torah. He was a person who went and he discovered Judaism by practicing every religion. In other words, he decided he wanted to find what the truth was in the world, and he wasn't a Hebrew. He came from Midian, and he went and he tried this type of religion and that type of religion. Went through all the religions until he came to the conclusion that Judaism was true. And at this point, it says that he comes to be with the Jewish people. In other words, before he was Moshe's father-in-law, but he didn't. They weren't together. Moshe was in Egypt with the whole story that we went through, and Yisro was in Midian. And now Yisro comes and he brings Moshe's wife and his children back to him, because Moshe didn't bring her back into Egypt, right, when they were going through this whole turmoil. And then we find that he wants to stay. He decides he wants to convert. And this line is how the rabbis know it, because it begins by saying, Vayishma Yisro Kohen Midian. So it says that Yisro, the priest of Midian, right, that's how we know he was a person who went to all the different idol worshipping and different religions, because it says he was a priest from Midian, which is another nation. He heard, it says, Vayishma Yisro, he heard, Chosein Moshe, is the father-in-law of Moshe, Es Kol Asher Asa Elokim LeMoshe, he heard everything that God did for Moshe, Ule Yisrael Amo, and for the Jewish people. Right? So, it's, Rashi has a question, a very apparent question. What did he hear? It says, Yisro heard and he came, and it gives us an idea. He heard everything that God did for the Jewish people and for Moshe when he took him out of Egypt. But what was it that made him come? So Rashi first answers a couple of questions. If we look at the Rashi, I don't know if you can read it, but I'll read it out loud. The first one, it says, Vayishma Yisro, Yisro heard. So Rashi's bothered by this statement. Mashmu Ashma Vaba. What news did Yisro hear that caused him to come? Right? Kriyas Yam Suf. He heard about the splitting of the Red Sea, V'milchamas Amalek, and he heard about the war with Amalek. Those are the two things Rashi says. The Gemara says that he heard also about the giving of the Torah. Now, as we realize, the giving of the Torah, of course, in time, based on time, hasn't happened yet. It's in a couple pages. So Yisro had to hear something before the coming of the Torah. So Rashi says the Torah is in order. It's following an order, right? It's going through time. And therefore, of course, Yisro comes before the Torah is given, so he couldn't have heard that the Torah was given. The Gemara says no, that the Torah is not in order, it's based on time. And that therefore this section where Yisro comes is actually after the giving of the Torah, even though in the Torah itself it appears to be before. In other words, the question is the Torah not only a book of truth, but is it also a history book? Is it also chronological? Is it based on time? So the Gemara says, the Talmud says, not necessarily. The Torah, is a book that teaches us how to live. And within it, it tells stories of our history. But it's not a history book. And it's not necessarily, for instance, even grammatically correct all the time. And it's also not necessarily in chronological order. Sometimes it's out of order. And there are a number of places where it appears to be out of order. And it's not necessarily an issue, because nobody says it is a history book or that it's chronological. It's to teach us something. Nevertheless, there's an argument among the commentaries is that the Torah is chronological. Rashi seems to say it is because he doesn't say that Yisro heard about the giving of the Torah. The Talmud says that it's not chronological order because Yisro heard it, even though this section is before what's in a couple of pages of the giving of the Torah. Now, what is it? The Medrash tells us that the splitting of the Red Sea and the war with Amalek were such enormous things to happen that the whole world heard about it. There's a famous Medrash that says that when the Red Sea split, the water in every area split also. Not just the Red Sea. When God caused the Red Sea to split to save the Jews and kill the Egyptians, he also caused the water to split in your bathtub and in your teacup and in every sea and ocean around the world, everywhere you were. So the Medrash seems to be saying that this miracle of splitting the Red Sea was much bigger than just splitting the Red Sea. It was splitting everything. However, for the most part, we understand that Medrash is not literal. And when a Medrash tells us something, it's not necessarily telling us a literal fact. For instance, the Medrash tells us that, let's say, that Moshe was basically 30 feet tall. And the Medrash tells us that Pharaoh was 1 foot tall. Right? And it doesn't mean that literally Pharaoh was 1 foot tall and Moshe was 30 feet tall, because of course Moshe could have just stood on him and killed him. What does he have to go and have arguments with him for? What kind of a leader, the greatest leader in the world, Pharaoh, right at that time, is a foot tall? Doesn't make sense. Like everybody else is normal height and he's a foot tall. So the Medrash is teaching us something, and it uses these things that sound absurd to teach you something. So it's very simple to understand what I mean. For instance, you imagine, and I've used this example before, that in Russia there was a Tsar, and the Tsar wasn't really a friend of the Jews, but the Jews paid taxes, so he let them stay. But there was a minister, and I'm not making this up, but it's a made-up story. One of the ministers of the Tsar really hated the Jews and wanted to destroy them. So he went and he was waiting for years after years to come up with a way to convince the Tsar to kill the Jews. So even though he would lose money. So he found that one day that the Tsar owed him a favor, that he did something for the Tsar that was very significant. So the Tsar owed him. So he told him, I want you to have the Jews killed. So the Tsar said, prepare a proclamation, right, and I'll sign it, and we'll do it. Right? So the day it says that he prepared the proclamation, right? The minister writes it up, and he comes in his carriage to give it to the Tsar. As he's entering into the courtyard, he has a heart attack and he dies. Right? And of course, it didn't happen. And the Tsar never signed the proclamation, and the Jews weren't killed. So now, if I was a writer, and I wanted to convey not only this story to you, but I wanted to convey the feeling of what was going on. You can imagine all the Jews are afraid that day they're going to get killed. If the Tsar signs that paper, now the army is going to kill them. So now I'm writing to tell the whole world about what happened here. So I say that the entire Jewish people would have drowned in a drop of ink. Right? If the drop of ink that he signed his name with could have killed all the Jews. Right? So now it's 2,000 years later, and you read what I wrote. You say, what stupid guy this was. How could he believe that a million people could die from one drop of ink? You can't drown in a drop of ink. How did they say such a thing? But you and I know that that I'm using a metaphor, right? So that's what Medrash is. Medrash uses a metaphor, yes?
Yeah, I wanted just to tell you, I don't know whether you know, Rabbi, that Stalin passed away on Purim of 1953 when he prepared to kill all the Jews, especially doctors back in the Soviet Union. And I read very interesting story of Rabbi Yitzhak Zilber when he was in Stalin's prison, and he told that the Stalin prepared to kill everybody. However, he passed away exactly on Purim of 1953.
Well, it's just right. So fiction becomes real, right? It becomes real.
True.
Yeah. And so here now you have, like in my example, right? we know that I'm using an example. I'm using poetic license to explain not only how all the Jews would die, but how it was so simple. Just a drop of ink could have done it, right? But I don't really believe that they could have drowned in a drop of ink. So too, when the Medrash says that Moshe was 30 feet tall, it doesn't mean he was 30 feet tall. It means something about how great he was, and how Pharaoh, as powerful as he was in the real world, he was insignificant. He was like a little man, like nobody, right? So here it says in the Medrash that when the sea split, the Red Sea split, all of the sea in the world split at the same time. All of the water, your teacup, the water split, your bathtub, the water split. So I don't believe that. I think that Medrash is not to be taken literally. I think the Medrash is saying the fact that the Red Sea split exactly at the right moment when the Jews were going in, at closed as soon as they exited, and the Egyptians entered, and the Egyptians were killed, and all of their belongings were washed up on the shore for the Jews to take, right, was such an amazing miracle that everyone in the world heard about it. They heard about it as if the water in their own house split. Right? That's how important it was. So what we get from this Medrash is that everybody in the world who was alive at that time heard the Jewish people have been created. There was no Jewish people until they came out of Egypt. The Jewish nation has now been created, and God is with them, and they're extremely powerful people. They destroyed the most powerful nation in the world, Egypt. They destroyed the economy. They destroyed everything about Egypt, and now they're coming out, right? So everyone heard this. So Yitro heard it. Right? That's what it says. Yitro heard it. Heard about the Red Sea. What's the difference between Yitro and everyone else? If Yitro decided he wanted to convert because of this, and he wanted to become a part of the Jewish people because he saw their relationship with God, why didn't everybody else? Why didn't the whole world say, we're going to become Jews? So the answer is in the first words of Rashi. Rashi says, Vayishma Yisro, Yitro heard. What did he hear? Ma Shmua. What did he hear? Shma v'ba. It's not that important what he heard, but he heard it and he came, and that's the difference. The rest of the world heard it and they didn't do anything, but Yisro was a truth seeker. We know that he was a person who pursued every truth in the world to try to find out what's really the way to live. Do I practice this religion? Is this idol real? Is this idol real? Is this religion real? Is this one real? He finally comes to the conclusion that it's Judaism, and what do you do about it? He does something about it. He goes and does it. Yes?
I have a question. Moses, God, he was mad with Moses, and he told him that you will see Israel from far, but you won't reach to Israel.
Right.
Why Moses, from all of them, the Jews there, from Israel, when he got the Torah in Har Sinai, he came down, and then he got married to Tzipporah.
Well, he got married to Tzipporah first.
Before so why God told him to go? She was not Jewish.
At this point, she would have been Jewish. She wasn't. See, none of them were born Jewish, right? Because the definition of a Jew only happened when the Torah was given. Before then, they were Hebrews. They were right, like Avram HaIvri. He was the Hebrew. All of his people were Hebrews. They were Hebrew slaves, right? They only became Jews when the Torah was given. And when the Torah was given, anyone who was there became a Jew. And then from then on, you had to follow the rules to be a Jew. Now, the idea of Moshe not being able to go into Israel, you're a couple of months ahead of us, but what happens there is there's a whole if we want to know the reasoning behind it, is because Moshe was such a great man. When he did something that was wrong, even very small, God had to punish him very severely because he was such a great person. It's one thing if I let's say I don't come to work one week, but the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of Canada doesn't come to work one week, you have to wonder, because he's a great man, very powerful man. Why doesn't he come? Like, what's going on? Right? So the same thing with Moshe. He was very powerful, very special, very close to God, and yet he did something wrong, so God punished him. So using the idea of Medrash, you say, why did he punish him that way? Why did he take Moshe and tell him, stand up on this mountain and look at the land of Israel, but you can't go there? Like, is that cruel?
Yeah.
Right? So it's not, because what was God doing? God was saying, whatever our forefathers do is an indication for us for the future. So here you have Jews throughout history who can't go to Israel. Right? If they want to go to Israel, they can't. Right? Throughout history, Jews are living in Russia and Poland and all over the place, and they all want to go to Israel, and they can't go. They can't get there physically, or they don't have the money, or the government won't let them. They can't go to Israel. So, but it's not logical that they should want to go to Israel. Why would a Jew who lived their family 1,000 years in Russia want to go to Israel? They've been in Russia for 1,000 years. So the answer is that every Jew has inside a desire to go to Israel. Where did that come from? From Moshe standing on the mountain and looking at Israel and wanting to go. And it became a part of his genetics, his spiritual DNA. And it was handed down to all of us. So all of us have inside of us this desire that we want to go to Israel. Even some stronger, some less, but that's where it comes from. But we talk more about it in the future. So here, though, what's the significant point? That Yitro heard, and he did something about it. And that's what's really was special about Yitro. And that's why the Parsha is named for him. Because he was a person who, he said, you want to show me that Judaism is true? Torah is true? I'll do it. Lots of people will come and say, oh, it's true, but, it's not for me. I'm too busy, or I got other things to do, or they just don't let it enter their brain, right? They hear it, but they don't let it become a part of them. Here, Yisro is saying, the Red Sea split and saved the Jews and killed the Egyptians. This is real. This is real. I mean, this is not a joke. This is not a movie. This really happened. I'm going to be a part of it. So Rashi tells you that's what was special about Yisro. He heard what everybody else in the world heard, but he's the only one who came. He's the only one who did something about it. And that's a very important point about who Yisro was. The rest of it tells us that he was a truth seeker. Right? He went and he wanted to find the truth in the world. So he tried all the religions, and then he did.
So the way that you explain it, Rashi, is really wrong, because it has to be after, if he has to seek any kind of religion and he has to seek the Judaism, it has to be after the Torah was given.
Because otherwise they wouldn't have known.
There was no exactly, there was no...
That could be, or you could say that he was seeking religion and based on what they knew at that point, because we know that up until this point God was teaching them Torah, but didn't give it to them yet. Like we see, it's already written in the Parsha, he taught them Shabbat.
I think there was only what they were given when they... what Abraham was given the circumcision, and then
you had after the Torah, you had Pesach, you had Rosh Chodesh,
you had the
and here you have Shabbat.
Peter Porimo, and you had this whatever. But there wasn't all these 10 commandments and all the...
No, so look right here. I'm going back.
Yeah,
okay?
I know, yeah.
I'm turning back the pages.
Yeah, no, I'm saying the way you explain it, it has to be
No, I know,
after.
but there's more. In other words, for instance, I'm going to turn back to the Parsha B'Shalach that talks about the splitting of the sea. So earlier. So here it says, Moshe says, eat it today, for today is Shabbat. Today you shall not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather, the 7th day is Shabbat. Yeah. So here you have the laws of Shabbat are taught to the Jews before the Torah is given.
When Shabbat was still in Bereshit.
I understand, but there were no people there. There was no one there. So here we see, basically what you have is you are agreeing with that side, but there is a reason to say the other way still. You can see both. In any case, this is what Yisro did. Yisro came. He was the significant that he came. And that's a lesson for people, that when you see a truth, when you see something, you have to act on it. Like I spoke last night, we have a 3-week series where we've been talking about women in Judaism and all of the aspects of it. So one of the things that came up was how in certain areas women are exempt. And that is, they don't have to do something, but they can. But you see that the rabbis treat it like the women can't do it. So you say, but if they are allowed to, well, then why would the rabbis say you can't? So it gives us an example. It says, like if a woman, actually this is actually true, it was true in Canada, it's still true in America, if a woman doesn't want to be on jury duty, she can simply go to the court and say, I'm a woman, I don't want to come, and they have to let her go. That's a law. In most of the United States, it's still a law. In Canada, it was a law. I don't know if it still is in some places or not. But a woman, because she's a woman, is allowed to say, I don't want to be on a jury. And the reason, they have lots of reasons behind it, but they have such a rule. And in Judaism also they have such a rule. But then they say that a woman shouldn't do it. And why not? Because if a woman chooses to not go, she says, I don't want to go. So then what happens is there's a rule that says that al ta'amod al dam rayacha, don't stand by the blood of your brother. If you see somebody being hurt, you have to do something. You can't walk the other way. You look out your window, you see someone being beaten up. You can't just close the blinds. You have to do something. Maybe you can't go out there and save them, but you can call the police. You can do something, right? So if a person is a witness to a crime, and it says that a woman shouldn't be a witness, so she's going to break the rule of not participating, right? My point of telling you this is that in Judaism, it's an understood fact that if you see a truth or you see someone being hurt, you have to do something. Just like Yitro. Yitro heard the truth and he did something. Right? When we see the truth, we also have to do something about it. We can't just simply just say, that's very nice, or I don't want to get involved and close the blinds. Right? That's the same idea here. So now it goes on and it tells us, Vayikach Yisro Chosen Moshe, and Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe, took, as Tzipporah Eshes Moshe, right? He took the wife of Moshe, because Moshe had sent her, it says, Moshe had sent her back away from the fighting, right? He didn't want her to get hurt, so he sent her back to her parents' house. V'eshnei baneha, and her two sons, which are also his two sons, asher shema echad Gershom, right? It says the name of one of them is Gershom. Why? Because Ger ha'is be'eretz nachriya, because Moshe said, I was a stranger in a strange land, that in Midian, right? He was a stranger there because he had to run away from Egypt. V'shem ha'echad, and another name, a name of the other one, Eliezer. Why? Ki elokei avi v'ezri v'atzileni mecherev paro, because my God, right, saved me from the sword of Paro, because Paro would have killed Moshe because of the early story where he killed the officer, right, who was beating up the Jew. Pharaoh could have killed him, but God saved him. So we already know this. This is not news. Moshe and Tzipporah had these children before. 2 weeks ago in the Parsha, it tells us why they named them these names. It's not telling us anything new here. So the person has to wonder, why is it telling you this now? Again, that Tzipporah comes with her two children. The name of one is Gershon, and this is why his name, and this one is Eliezer, and this is why his name. We already know. It told us before that when Moshe and Tzipporah had the children, the two of them named them Gershon and Eliezer, and this was why. So the Torah is repeating itself, and the Torah is not supposed to do that. It's not supposed to repeat. So why is it seem to say the reason here? Secondly, it says one is named Gershon, and then how would we say it in English? Right? The first one is named Gershon, and the other one is named Eliezer, but it doesn't say that. It says how Echad Gershom, right? Well, one is called Gershom, Ki Amar Geris V'Shema Echad, and the name of one is Eliezer. It's grammatically wrong. The one, right? There's the oldest one, so you say, and one of them is named Joe, and the other one is named Bob. You don't say one is named Joe and one is named Bob. Right? You're in one sentence, you have one and then two. So there's two things that we're learning from this. That Yisro was teaching his son-in-law a lesson. One thing is that before, when Moshe had these children, he was a nobody. He was a stranger living in a strange land. He was the son-in-law of Yisro. He wasn't the head of the Jews. He wasn't the leader of the Jews. He was a fugitive. He was running away from Pharaoh. Pharaoh would have killed him. He had no power, no authority. He's a shepherd in the middle of nowhere. And he has these two children. And he names one of them because God saved them from being killed by Pharaoh. And he names the other one because he has to live in this strange land. So he names him that. And what's his job? His job, he's a shepherd. And what does he do? He takes care of his family. That's it. So now he's a big shot. Now he's the king of the Jews. He took the Jews out of Egypt. He's changed the world. Right? So Yisro comes to him and says, Moshe, there's something you've got to remember. You are an important person, and you're running the Jewish nation, but you are also a father of children. You have to remember your children. You can't forget that. You can't tell me, Yisro, I don't have time for this. My son comes home with an F on his report card. You got to deal with it. I'm the head of the Jewish people. I don't have time for this. You have to take care of it. And Yisro is saying, no, Moshe, you might be the head of the Jewish people, but you're a father to these two kids, and you also have to take time for them. You have to take time for your wife, take time for your kids. So that's why it's telling you who they are, what their names are, and why their names are that way. Because Moshe can't forget who he was. He can't become an arrogant person. Like, you see sometimes, I don't know, I've never seen it myself in real life, but you read about it in books and in the movies and the newspaper. A regular guy, he's got a business, and suddenly his business goes crazy, and he's making billions of dollars, and he divorces his wife, and he doesn't have time for his kids, and he goes and got a trophy wife, and he does all of the things that it says, right? Why? Because he forgot who he was. Now he's a big shot. He forgot that he was a regular guy who had a wife who took care of him, who helped him through all of the difficult times of his life, and that he had a family he took care of. No, now he's a big shot, doesn't have time for that. So Yisro is telling Moshe, and really Yisro is telling all of us, that no matter who you are and what you do, you always have to make sure that you have time for your family, and you always remember what happened to you. And it's also, what does it say? The name is Gershon, and the name of Eliezer, is because both of them are ones. In other words, both of them are unique. Both of them are special. You don't have a first child and a second child. The first child you love, the second one a little less. There's no such thing. Right? We all know that every one of our children are uniquely different from each other. Every one of them we love because of who they are. They're different. One of them you love because they're funny, and one of them you love because they're smart. You have all kinds of reasons that you love your children, and each one is different. So that's what the Torah is telling us, that they're not all the same. One of them is this, and one of them is this. They're both one. Right? If you're counting, you have one, and then your second son, your third son. No, you have one son, and you have one son, and you have one son. That's what Yisro is saying. So Yisro is giving his son-in-law a lesson in parenting, and we're picking up from that. We learn from that. And then now it says that in verse 5 here, it says, Vayavo Yisro Choshen Moshe, or in the English, Jethro, the father-in-law of Moshe, came to Moshe with his sons and his wife to the wilderness. Now we just said that, right? The first 4 lines tell you, and now it tells you, right? And he says to Moshe, I'm your father-in-law, I've come to you with your wife and your 2 sons. Now it says, Moshe went out to meet his father-in-law. We've just had this story. Yisro hears it, he comes with the wife and the kids. Then it says, Yisro comes to see Moshe with the wife and the kids. And then it says, Moshe went out to greet his father-in-law, who came with the wife and the kids. Like, how many times are going to tell you? Right? So, one of the things it tells us is that this third time, where it says that Moshe went out, is not an insignificant statement. When the United States became a country, so it was a new country, didn't have all the rules yet. And one of the things is you have protocol. How do you do certain things? Like for instance, if I'm a senator in, let's say, New York, and the president comes to New York, so does he come to see me, or do I go to see him? Like, he's in New York now, and he's in a hotel, right? So do I, as the governor of New York, go, or the senator from New York, whatever, go to see him? Because this is my state, but he's the president. Or does he come to see me? What's the protocol? There has to be they set up a protocol of how it's done. In fact, when George Washington was president of the United States, it says that he went to another state, I forgot which one, and he went to see the governor, and he never saw him because they didn't know the protocol. Should the president go to see him, or should he go to see the president? And they ended up him coming to the state. He didn't go, the other one didn't come, and he left. You never got to see him, right? Because they didn't set a protocol. Here you have Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law. So he's your father-in-law. You have to give respect to your father-in-law. On the other hand, Moshe is the king. He's the king, and Yisro is coming to his place where Moshe is the king of the Jews. So who goes to see who? So here it says, Moshe went out to meet his father-in-law. He prostrated himself, right? He lays down in front of his father-in-law. He kisses his father-in-law, and then they start talking. That is to tell you that it makes no difference in our world how special, how important you are. You still have to give proper respect to people. So you can be Moshe, the great Moshe, who did all that he did, the closest to God of anyone, and you still, as Moshe shows us, you have to go out and greet your father-in-law, who's a priest in Midian. At this point, he's not even a Hebrew. He's not even one of you. Nevertheless, Moshe has to give respect to him, which shows us the same, that how we have to give respect to people no matter what position we're in, right? That's Jewish protocol, right? That's how it works. Okay? Now, on the bottom of 396 and 397, we now have something going on with Yisro. It says, and I'll read it in English, beginning on verse 13, it says, it was on the next day, so the day after he comes, that Moshe sat to judge the people. So now, here's another proof that it was after the Torah was given, because what's he judging the people with? He has to have the laws, right, which comes from the Torah. So he says, he sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moshe from the morning till the evening. So here's what happens. Moshe comes down, for those who want to say that the Torah was already given, so Moshe comes down from the mountain with all the information, right? And he has to teach it to the Jews. In the meantime, people have problems. I did business with this guy, and he didn't pay me, or he paid me less than I thought, or I did this, and there's all kinds of, you need a court, right? The Jews need the court just like anybody needs a court. You have differences, you have arguments, you have problems, right? This guy says he would deliver something on the 10th day, and I sold it, and I had a buyer on the 10th day. He didn't come on the 10th day, he came on the 12th day, and I lost my buyer, so he owes me money. No, I don't owe you money, right? You need a court. So what was the court? Moshe was the court. He's the only one who knew. So it says, he sat to judge the people. He would sit under a tree, and the people who had court cases would stand in line. Right? And he would answer every question. Everything from what bracha do you make on popcorn to a life and death. Every question that people had, Moshe was the one who answered it. So it says the people stood by Moshe from the morning until the evening. They were standing there all day. And one after another, they're asking him questions. Next, right? So the father-in-law Moshe saw everything that he was doing. His father-in-law sees it and he says, what are you doing? Are you cuckoo? That's crazy. You're going to kill yourself. 7 days a week, from morning to night, you're going to sit under a tree and just answer questions? What is this things that you do to the people? Why do you sit alone with all the people standing by you from morning till night? So Moshe says, because the people come to me to seek God. They want the answers. When they have a matter, one comes to me, and I judge between a man and his fellow, and I make known the decrees of God. That's how I'm teaching them. So the father-in-law, it says, tells him, that's not what you do. He says, you go and get yourself a group of people, and you teach them. Right? They're your Supreme Court. Then you get them to teach another group, and that's going to be your federal court. And then those ones are going to be after them, and they're going to be your lower court. So anybody who wants to know what bracha to make on popcorn, they're going to go to the low court. They're going to, right? So they'll go to them. And then if somebody has a more important question, where at life and death, they're going to go to the next level, or the next level. And if nobody knows the answer, then they'll come to you. But this way, you don't have people, hundreds of people spending a whole day waiting to see you. You're sitting there a whole day. Like everyone says, I'm going to go to court. I got to sit there waiting for Moshe. I'll get there, 100 people in line in front of me, 1,000 people in line in front of me. I'll be here all day. So Yisro says, no, you got to create a court system. And Moshe listens to him, and he does. So here we have another important aspect of what's given to the Jewish people. This is by Yisro. This is an important fact also. The Torah tells us, it says in the Talmud, if someone tells you that non-Jews have Torah, you don't believe them. But it says if someone tells you that non-Jews have wisdom, you should believe them. And this is an example. Because Yisro at this point, he didn't have Torah. Right? He didn't have the Torah knowledge, but he had wisdom. He understood you can't have a court system with one judge in the whole country. Set up a system and make it work. Right? So he came and he educated Moshe how to set up a company. Basically make a corporation. Have all of these people working for you. Each one's got his job. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to micromanage everything. You go out and do it. And he did. And everybody was happy. And this was a very important point for us to know, that when we deal outside, with all kinds of people, that they have what to teach us. It doesn't make a difference if the person's Jewish, they're not Jewish. They have wisdom. There is something we can learn from everybody. And here we see how Moshe, right, who set up the entire system that we use today for the Beit Din, for the court system, comes on the idea that Yisro gave him to do that. That's what it says there. And it says that Moshe heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did everything that he had said. And it says Moshe chose men of accomplishment, and then they had others, and they had others, and the others. Right? And the last line in that part is, Vayishlach Moshe es chosno v'yelech lo el artzo. And then Moshe said goodbye to his father-in-law, and his father-in-law went back home. Why he went back home, we're not sure. It means that he changed his mind, didn't change his mind about being Jewish, but he went back home. He had a life. So he could have stayed as a Jew, and he went back. Now the Jewish people are going to go through the desert, and it goes through, the next section is this, they are getting ready to go to Mount Sinai. So they start moving on, and they go preparing to go right outside the mountain. And now you have the 3 million Jews, or Hebrews, standing outside the mountain. And at the beginning of the bottom of 402 and 403, it tells us, Hashem says to Moshe, go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their clothing. Let them be prepared for the third day, for on the third day Hashem shall descend in the sight of the entire people of Mount Sinai. You shall set boundaries, right? They shouldn't touch the mountain. And Moshe, he went down to the people and he told them what to do. Be ready after a 3-day period. Don't do all these things. And on the third day, the story begins. In other words, God tells Moshe the Jewish people are going to have this amazing experience. This is an experience that a human being has never had before. It's going to be where I and they touch. They get together. Right? They're going to experience me. This is the only time in history this is going to happen. The entire Jewish nation is going to stand around this mountain, and they're going to have an experience where they're going to come into contact with me. But they have to be ready. They have to prepare themselves. They have to physically be clean. They have to mentally, spiritually prepare their mind so they can have this happen. So they go and they do that. And beginning on verse 16, on the third day when it was morning, there was thunder and lightning and a heavy cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the shofar was very powerful, and the entire people that were in the camp shuddered. So here, the people woke up in the morning on the day of the giving of the Torah, right? And already nature is starting to change. They're starting to see things happen, and they're frightened. Moshe brought the people forth from the camp towards God, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain. All of Mount Sinai was smoking. So here you have smoke coming off the mountain, and the Jewish people are standing around the mountain, because Hashem had descended upon it in the fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of the furnace, and it goes on, right? The sound of the shofar got louder, and then Moshe would speak, and God would respond to him in a voice. So the Jewish people are standing around the mountain. There's smoke and fire on the mountain. They can hear Moshe speak, which in of itself is pretty miraculous. 3 million people hearing Moshe talk, one man talk without a microphone, right? And God answers him, and they hear a voice of God at that point. Then it says Hashem descended on the mountain to be on the mountain. Hashem calls Moshe to come up the mountain, and this is where the 40 days begin, that Moshe goes up to learn the Torah, right, up on top of the mountain. And this experience, right, of the human being coming into touch with the divine is important on many levels. First thing is that every religion in the world claims to have this happen. Everybody claims that this happened. That the leader says, I came into contact with God. God told me this, this, and this, and now we have to do it. Right? So you pick any religion, Hinduism, right, Christianity, Islam, they all have a point where somebody was in contact with God, and he comes back and he tells the people, this is what God told me. Now, this is an important point about the veracity, the truth of Judaism. Because one thing that makes Judaism unique over all the other religions is that Judaism is the only religion that does not say what I just told you. Right? Every other religion says a person goes, they have a interaction with God, God gives them information, a book or something, and now he goes back to the people and said, God gave this to me, we all have to do this. And everybody follows it. So you had Muhammad, he had his interactions with God, he writes the Quran, everybody has to follow it. You have in Christianity that with Jesus has this relationship with God, he's a superhuman person, everybody has to follow it. So every religion, in Hinduism, you have the boy Shiva goes out to war, God comes to him, he has this interaction with God, he gives him the Bhagavad Gita, right, the book of Hindu beliefs, and everybody has to follow it. So the difference in Judaism is there wasn't a person who went to talk to God who comes back and says, this is what happened to me. Because that already has to be, for a critical thinking person, that's already got to be strange. Right? In other words, it's like, I'm going to come to class next week, and I'm going to tell you, on Tuesday night, last night, God came to me, and he gave me some information. And he says, everybody who comes to my class, he has to give me all of the money in their bank account, right? And you have to be poor from now on. and all the work you do, you have to give me all your money. That's what God told me, and you have to do it. But so you're going to say, what are you, crazy? God told you. If God wants, it's like a famous joke. This is, God wants me to give you my money. He shouldn't tell you that. He should tell me that, right? Tell me that I should give you my money. Don't tell you, right? Because that's self-serving. You're the one who's going to get all the money, so you're lying. It's not true. Right? If God wants us to do this, He would tell all of us. Right? It's like we say sometimes with Christianity, where Christianity says, God gave the Torah to the Jews, who are His chosen people, but we failed, so now they're the chosen people. Right? That's what they say. That Jesus came and He changed it. We don't have to follow the law. All you need is love now, and we will. And God, He said, and God changed it. So we say, well, if God put all of us around this mountain and gave us the Torah, you don't think that if He changed His mind, He would tell us? He didn't tell us that. We don't have that anywhere. And this is the important point. Our religion is the only one that says that every single Hebrew who was alive at that moment saw this. Not just one person, the one who's the leader. Everybody saw this. Everybody was there. Everyone heard the voice of God. Everyone saw, it says they saw the mountain smoking. It says if we look closely in the words, it actually says that they heard lights and they saw sounds, which means that nature was totally mixed up. Right? You don't see sounds, you hear sounds, right? So everything was on purposely. God changed everything, and it says that they heard the voice of God. They actually heard whatever that means. Every single person alive heard it. There's no other religion that says that. Every other religion only tells you that the person who benefits the most in the religion, he was in contact with God. Nobody else was. A guy comes back, he creates his own religion. Everybody has to do what I say, right? Whatever I say, God said that whatever I say, you have to do. So of course that's what he's going to say, because nobody else heard him. But everybody heard this. And this is a very important point, because this is a basic proof to the truth of our religion, because everybody was there. And everybody has a mitzvah on Pesach to tell their children what they saw. So the first year, the father tells his child was there too. So he's just not telling him anything he doesn't know. The child tells his child, right? So he tells his child, I saw it myself, and your grandfather saw it himself. You weren't there, but we were. Then the next one goes and says, I wasn't there, right? But my grandfather and my great-grandfather were there. They saw it themselves, and you know your grandfather. So you can go 4 generations, and you actually know somebody who saw the Torah given, right? You actually know them. But just like we know our grandfathers, they knew their grandfathers. So it goes on through time that it's handed down to each family what the great-grandfather and mother saw when they got the Torah. No other religion can say that. This is a basic proof to the truth of our tradition, of our Masorah, what we call our tradition. And then it says that Moshe goes up and God spoke the following. Now God spoke the following to everyone. And this is the Ten Commandments, what we call the Ten Commandments. Now, we should understand really what the Ten Commandments are, because they're misunderstood. The Ten Commandments really, in Hebrew, are not the Ten Commandments. They're called the Aseres Divros. Divros means words. 10 words, 10 statements. It doesn't say 10 commandments. They happen to be commandments, but we have 613 commandments. We don't have 10. Right? And people misunderstand that. Like I'll meet people sometimes and they'll say, well, I'm not religious, but I keep the 10 commandments. Of course, that makes no sense, because one of them is to keep Shabbat, right? And if you don't keep Shabbat, because you tell me I don't keep Shabbat, I'm not religious, that I keep the 10 commandments, that means that they never read the 10 commandments. They just say it. But the 10 commandments are not really 10 commandments. They're 10 statements, which happen to be commandments, but they're only 10 of 613. We shouldn't take it out of context and say the 10 are really extraordinary and they're very important and the other ones are less important. It's not true. They're all significant. There are reasons why these 10 are said, but it's not because they're more important. And these 10, the original intent of God was that every person, every Hebrew, every person who was at the mountain, through all the millions of people who were there, should actually hear God say these 10 commandments. This would be an unconvertible truth. Nobody could argue with this, that this happened. They were there. I heard the voice of God. I heard it myself. Theoretically, if I were the one telling you this, I heard it. You heard it. I'm not telling you anything you didn't hear. You heard yourself. You were there. So what does he say? He says, it begins, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. Right? Statement number one. So now we understand who is speaking to us, right? And who is this God? Asher hotzischa me'eretz Mitzrayim bebeis avadim. I took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. So don't think this is insignificant. For a people, an ancient people, to have been slaves, to no longer be slaves, right, as the Jews were, is an extraordinary thing. It's not normal. That the Egyptians would never give up slaves. It's free labor. That the fact that this happened was miraculous. I'm the one who caused it. You should have no other gods before me. You shouldn't make any idols, right? And it goes on through all of the commandments. Now, the Talmud tells us that the average Hebrew or the average Jew standing at the mountain couldn't handle this. Like the spiritual effect of hearing God speak, whatever that means. I can't say I know what that really means because God has no body. So did they actually hear it with their ears? Did they hear it inside their soul? I don't know what it means. But they heard this. It says it was such an enormous spiritual effect that they died. That's what it says. The Medrash says that all of the Jews died, and God had to bring them back to life. It says they said, if you continue to do this, we're just going to continue to die because it's like a person getting hit with an avalanche of water or snow. A little bit of snow, a little bit of water is not going to do anything to you, but a lot of it at one time, right, even if it's only for a couple of seconds, can kill you. So, too, we can live with spirituality, and we can grow spiritually, but to go from nothing to having God talk to me was enormous. We have to work at it. It's like if I say to you, go to the gym, and you need to work out. So you should start by taking the weights like this, with 150 pounds in each hand. And do that. But no, you can't do that. You try that, you'll break your arm or it won't move. You can't do it. Now, one day, if you work at it long enough, maybe you could. Slowly, you could do it. But you can't do it the first day. And that's what happened here. They walk in, and the first day, the first thing they hear is God talking. This is something that, years and years of work on oneself, you finally become a prophet. You could maybe get an understanding of hearing God, but to wake up and then go from a regular person to hear that, it was too much for them. And therefore, they told him after the third of the commandments, we don't want to hear this anymore. Don't tell us. Tell Moshe, he'll tell us the rest. We got the point. You're God. You took us out of Egypt. We've had this. Now, Moshe is on a much higher spiritual level. You teach him, he'll teach us. And it says in the Medrash that that's what happened from this point. Now, the Ten Commandments themselves are extraordinarily interesting because the first thing is they were on two stones. Now, we see the Ten Commandments in the synagogue, they look like this. That's not what they look like. There's many interpretations as to why they made them look that way. But really, the description in the Torah is that they were cubes. They were cubes, and they were the same size on every one of the sides. So you had 6 sides, right? The 4 sides and the top and the bottom. They were exactly the same. They were cubes. They were made out of something like sapphire, and they had many miracles. First thing is, God gave these to Moshe. They weren't made by a human being. And it says that, for instance, whatever side you looked at it, you could read it. Right, which when you're writing a tablet is you can't do, because if you're writing it this way, if you look from the back, it's backwards, right? The next thing is if you have a letter like a samich, the samich has it's a circle, so the piece of stone in the center, right, would fall, right, because there's nothing holding it up, right? It would fall out or fall down because you cut out from the stone, because you say you have to see it from both sides. So if you see it from here, you got to see it from all 6 sides. And you could read it. So that was miraculous. The second thing is the centerpiece of the letters didn't fall. They floated on every one of the letters. So the thing itself was miraculous. Right? The stone was extraordinarily miraculous. And they were very large and very heavy. And it says that God gave these to Moshe. And it said these on there. And also, we have 2 places in the Torah where the 10 Commandments are given. It's given here, then you look later in the book of Devarim, it tells you again about this, but it doesn't tell you the same 10 Commandments. There's a difference. Like you have, here it says, on the top of 410, Zachor es Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho. You should remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And the other one it says, You should be shomer at Yom HaShabbat. You should guard the Sabbath day. You have zachor here, you have shamor there. Right? It's different. Zachor means to remember. It's the positive. Like kiddush is zachor. Right? And you say kiddush, you're remembering Shabbos. Shamor means to keep it. Don't break it. Don't go driving in a car. So two different words have different meanings. And the Talmud says that all of these were on purpose, and all of them were in both. So it's what it says here, remember the Sabbath day. It says, God said this, right? God says, remember the Sabbath day. It says that God said both words, remember and guard, at the same time. He said two words at one moment. We can't do that. Right? We not only can't do it, the Talmud says you can't hear two things at once. You ever try talking on the phone and your kids talk to you at the same time? Doesn't work? Wait, hold on a second. Look, I can't hear two things at once, right? That's true. You can't hear two things at once. Why not? Why can't you hear two things at once? You can hear someone talk and do something else at the same time. It's possible. You can watch TV and read a book, so to speak. You can write a note, right? But so why can't you hear two things at once? The Talmud says you can't. You definitely can't say two things at once, right? Your mouth only can do one thing at a time. But it says here, God said both words at the same time. That there are a number of times in the Torah where that happens. And there's a special reason that to tell you certain messages that he said both at the same time. And here he does that with Shabbat. Then they have some of the Ten Commandments, we'll have to conclude with that, but that are very odd. Like, I understand keep Shabbat. I understand don't murder. Those are big ones, right? But don't be jealous of your friend's wife. Like, come on, let's put this in perspective. Don't be jealous of your neighbor's wife. Don't be jealous of your neighbor's stuff, right? But even his wife, like, why is that so important? Tell me, don't kill, don't steal, don't overthrow the government. Big things, right? Don't believe in God. Don't deny the existence of God. Right? Don't hurt people. Don't beat up widows. Tell me something significant. Here, just don't be jealous of your friend's wife. That's a Ten Commandment. So this is one way that we know that the Ten Commandments are not necessarily the most important. But the idea of a person not being jealous of another person's things, be it the wife, house, husband, whatever, is an important point. Because it means that you have a misunderstanding of how the world works. You see, how the world works is that we believe that there's justice in the world. Ultimately, that God does things in a just way. So if God gives you a spouse, right, and you picked a spouse, but if you have a spouse, there's a reason for you to have that spouse. Specifically, that either something that positive or it could be a problem. But there's something specifically for you. When you have a job, you make a living. You could have a doctor that's rich and a doctor who's not so rich. Right? Both of them are doctors. Both of them are smart. Both of them are good at what they do. Just one of them is, one isn't. You're going to have two businessmen in the same business. One's makes a lot of money. One doesn't. We can't even tell why one would be better than the other. We can think we might know, but we really don't know. The fact is that God has an effect on people who needs, in order to be a good person, he needs to be rich. This one needs not to be rich, and this one needs this spouse. This one needs this spouse. For us to say that God's wrong, he gave me the wrong spouse, he gave me the wrong job, he's wrong, I should have his wife. Who is he to have that wife? I should have it. Who is he to have that house? I should have that house. That means that I don't understand the involvement of God in my life. Right? And that's why this is important. That the idea of jealousy, there's different types of jealousy. One type of jealousy is that, you have a nice car, I want a nice car too. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm going to work hard and to get myself a nice car. The kind of jealousy that's not good is, you have a nice car, who are you to have a nice car? I should have a nice car, and I'll go out with my key and scratch your car so that you shouldn't have such a nice car. Right? That's a bad type of jealousy. And that's what it means when you're jealous of somebody else's stuff. You're saying, who are you to have such a nice house? Well, I'll tell you who he is. He's the guy that God gave it to. God says he should have a nice house. For whatever reason. Maybe it'll hurt him. Maybe it'll help him. You don't know why. But the fact is, you're not the judge. God's the judge. And if you think you're the judge, and you're jealous of what he has, then you don't understand how the world works. That's why it's one of the important mitzvahs. Because the thing itself is not so important, not so significant, but the reason behind it is important. And that's really why it says that. Now there's so many things here about the giving of the Torah that are worth talking about that we really don't have time to go in. But we're going to see how Moshe comes down the mountain, and what happens. That in the end, in upcoming weeks, we're going to see that Moshe comes down after 40 days, and he sees the Jewish people are sinning. The Jewish people have, what happened is Moshe says, I'm going up the mountain, I'll be back in 40 days. He knows that God brings him back in 40 days. 40 days come, the Jews are a bunch of accountants, and they figure out 40 days, he's not back. Where is he? So it's a lie. It's not true. This whole thing is fake. So they start praying to a cow, which is the god of the Egyptians. They start going back they're going to go back to Egypt. They're going to start following the religion of Egypt because Judaism's false. Moshe didn't come back. Well, as is always the case, they were wrong. They didn't add correctly, and they came up with the wrong time. And Moshe comes down and sees them praying the calf, and he smashes the 10 Commandments as a way of startling them. We're going to talk about it when we get to that portion, but it's very significant, the idea that when Moshe comes down the mountain after the 40 days, he comes into an experience that is shocking to him. Because when we say that the Jews have chutzpah, that they have chutzpah is just our way of saying that we have stiff-necked, right? Kasha orif, right? That's how the Torah calls chutzpah. You'd say the Jews just went through being slaves in Egypt. They saw all these miracles, and they saw it happen to the Egyptians, not to them. Their water turned to blood, our water didn't turn to blood. Their firstborn children died, ours didn't die. When they come chasing us by the sea, the whole army is destroyed. The whole army, the Egyptian army, is gone. Can you imagine if the American army decides to declare war on our shul, and we win, right? And their whole army is gone? That's what happened. The whole army is gone, right? They go to Mount Sinai, they hear the voice of God, right? It's unbelievable. They hear the voice of God. They see Moshe go up the mountain. He's gone for 40 days, and then he doesn't come back when they say, this is a joke. This is not real. You see, he was wrong. It's not true. He didn't come back in 40 days. The whole thing's false. Yeah, so what's going through the minds of these people? They look at the experiences they went through. It's like, what have you done for me lately? That's what they're saying. We go through all of these things. God saves us and helps us and turns the world upside down, and everything's great for us. And then we figure out Moshe's coming back on the 40th day, and he doesn't come back, and it's all false. It's all right. That shows you the way that the Jews, on the one hand, to be kasha orif, to have chutzpah, to be tough, was necessary for us to be able to live in the world. For the world's always attacking the Jews. Now, you ever think it's funny why every single person who runs for office or who's a leader, they always ask them, what do you think about the Jews, or what do you think about Israel? Like CUPE. Right? It's a union of city and municipal employees. Right? What the heck do they got to do with Jews and Israel? What do they got to do with it? They don't make federal, they don't make how the government works with, the Canadian government works with Israel. They're a bunch of local union. Their job is to try to make it better for the worker. What's it got to do with Israel? It's got nothing to do with Israel. So why do they have an opinion? Right? Why does everybody in the world have an opinion? You have, some guy becomes the head of of a union. You have to ask him, what do you think about the Jews? What's it got to do with anything? Right? You don't ask them, what do you think about women? What do you think about children? What do you think about the color orange? You don't ask them. But this, everybody, why? Because the whole world, right, cares about it. I always tell people, open the National Post any day, and there's at least one story or article about Israel. Why is that? Israel is such a little place, and the Jews are not even 1% of the world. Why is it that every day in the newspaper there's something about us? What is it? It's because the role of the Jew in the world is extremely significant. It's very important. But the world doesn't want to hear our message. They want us to be the thieves. They say we are the bums, and we're not going to do we're not going to be the special people. So they judge us. The world judges us to a higher standard. Right? They always do. Like, why do they pick on Israel? Because they say, oh, Israel dropped a bomb and 2 people got killed. Right? And Israel comes out and apologizes. They didn't mean to kill the 2 people. They sent out letters that everybody should leave, and they sent in people, right, soldiers, Israeli soldiers who could be killed. They send them in there to tell people, get out of this area, we're going to drop a bomb. What kind of army drops a bomb somewhere and tells you beforehand, we're going to drop a bomb here? Right? Israel does that, and the whole world goes crazy that the Arabs go and they drop a bomb in a school. And they say they want to drop a bomb in the school. And after the bomb goes off and kills the kids, they're dancing in the streets because of it. Nobody says nothing, right? Because we're judged to a higher standard. Well, you got to be tough. You have to have a stiff neck. You have to have chutzpah to be able to live with that for thousands of years, right? But there's a bad side to it too, right? And the bad side is that we're critical. That if one thing seems to go wrong, then it's all wrong. And if Moshe is 5 minutes late from coming down the mountain, then there is no God. There is no story. The whole thing's a joke. Let's go back to Egypt and start over again. Right? It makes no sense that the Jews do this, but that's how we are. That's going to be the next issue that we deal with as we go through the Parshas. Why that happens and why we're that way. Okay? So I guess we better stop here for today.